Welcome to the Part 4 Pre-Diabetes Diabetes Workshop. This is the last part in the series. It's loaded with a lot of videos. I just think videos just hit it home. So I hope at the end of this Part 4 you have a full understanding of exactly what diabetes is. And then, of course, then we have to figure out how we're going to go and handle it. And I have other workshops dealing with that. So this next video is a real simple video, but I think it explains what's happening in your body really quite well.
Simple. When we eat, food travels to the stomach. Food is made up of three basic nutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats.
Okay, so one of the things with this three slides, so at the end of the day, your food breaks into carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Now, here's the thing. The proteins and the fats really don't increase your glucose level. They have a very, very low glycemic load. So if you go and Google the glycemic index of proteins, you're going to see that it is really quite low. Sometimes, I think proteins are like around 10, and fats actually have a 0 glycemic index. So when we talk about the glycemic index, we talk about controlling prediabetes, diabetes. The thing that we're really trying to go after here is your carbohydrates. And if you're going to consume carbohydrates, they have to be of the very, very best quality carbohydrates, meaning from like spinach or broccoli or vegetables. Those are carbohydrates, but they also have fiber, so they don't increase your sugar and glycemic index. And proteins and fats are they pretty much have no effect on your glucose or your glycemic index.
During digestion, carbohydrates are broken down into sugar, otherwise known as glucose. Here's a quick fact. Carbohydrates include foods such as bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, fruit, milk, and yogurt.
So with this, like they talk about fruit is a carbohydrate, right? So if you have diabetes, if you have a high glucose level, high insulin level, you probably shouldn't be eating fruit. But spinach or broccoli is also carbohydrates, but that has a very, very low glycemic index.
In a normal digestive process, sugar travels from the stomach, through the bloodstream, to your body's muscle and fat cells. However, sugar can't enter these cells without the help of a special hormone called insulin, which is produced by the pancreas. Insulin acts like a key, unlocking the doors to the muscle and fat cells and allowing the sugar to enter. The cells then use this sugar as fuel to provide energy for the body. When this process is functioning properly, sugar entering the bloodstream from the stomach.
So you can see here that there's one sugar and one insulin. This I, that's the insulin right there, right? So it's going to show you someone that has prediabetes and is diabetic here in a short bit, and you'll see how that changes.
Is able to exit the bloodstream at the muscle and fat cells. In this manner, the body is able to regulate the concentration of sugar in the bloodstream. Now let's see what happens in a person with diabetes. Sugar enters the bloodstream, but one of two things happens. Either the pancreas does not produce a sufficient quantity of insulin to match the sugar entering the bloodstream, or the body cells do not respond to the insulin that the body is producing. In both cases, the result is the same. Cell doors remain closed, causing sugar to get backed up in the bloodstream. As a result, blood sugar levels rise. This creates several problems. Because sugars are not able to enter your body's cells, your body is not getting the fuel it needs. As a result, you may feel tired or fatigued.
So this is a critical point. So if you have insulin resistance, if you're pre-diabetic, if you are diabetic, if you have any of those markers that are outside of the functional range, is your cell here becomes crusty, right? So it's insulin resistant. So the insulin here, the insulin which wants to attach to it can't attach to the cell, allowing this door to open. So what happens? All the sugar out here builds up in your bloodstream. Remember, this is your blood. Okay, this is your bloodstream. So all the sugar which is the energy source, builds up in your bloodstream. It doesn't get in your cell, and you become chronically fatigued, among many, many other things that happen in your body as well.
You may try to dilute the excess sugar in the bloodstream by pulling fluid out of your cells. This can leave you feeling dehydrated and thirsty. Most importantly, over time, exposure to high blood sugar levels can cause damage to vital organs connected to the bloodstream, such as your eyes, kidneys, nerves, and heart. If not controlled properly, diabetes can lead to serious complications, such as blindness, amputation, kidney failure, heart attack, and stroke.
Now, if you recall, why this happens is back when we watched, in part 1, we watched Dr. Oz, and he said that high glucose levels, that's like a knife, is like glass shards, right? Glass shards in your arteries, and that basically is tearing apart all your organs, causing chronic inflammation.
In order to avoid these complications, people with diabetes must take steps to keep their blood sugar levels in a normal range. One way to do this is through diet. By reducing the amount of carbohydrates you eat in a single meal or snack, you can regulate the amount of sugar entering the bloodstream and prevent your body's insulin supply from becoming overwhelmed.
So you can see here, now we just changed the diet to an anti-inflammatory diet. There's less sugar floating around in your bloodstream, and your inflammation automatically goes down.
This may mean limiting high-sugar foods such as cake, pie, candy, and soda. You know which ones. Another way to regulate blood sugar is through exercise. Physical activity makes your body's muscle and fat cells more receptive to insulin. In other words,
so this is a key. So exercising will allow this key, right, the insulin here, that's the insulin, to actually attach to the cell and open the door. So exercise makes your cells healthier and allows the insulin to be attached there, and for the insulin to attach and the sugar to go in.
Those muscle and fat cells that wouldn't open before, now they will.
Okay, so that was a great video. So I'm going to go on to another video here. And so let me just change the other video. Let's go on to the other video here. So one of the things that I'm going to want you to do is right now just hold the video, pause the video, and what I want you to do is write down these 4 things. So just take your time, write these things down, because this is a key component here. Is 1, your cells never eat more than they need except fat cells. Okay, that's a key concept. Free fatty acids, what is a free fatty acids? That's going to come from fat sources. So what would that be? Like avocados are high in fat. Free fatty acids that are used for energy come from your stored fat. Or they can come from food such as high fatty foods like avocados. This is a key. Number 3 is key. The free fatty acids do not need insulin to get into your cells and used for energy. So free fatty acids do not need insulin to get into your cells and used for energy. So what does that mean? That means you can use free fatty acids in your bloodstream. Your cells can use that without insulin being present. And that's what we want. This is our goal. Our goal here is to get you to number 3. Okay? Now, if there isn't insulin present, you can't access, if there is insulin present, you cannot access fat from your fat cells. So, what does that mean? This means if you have a high glucose and high insulin levels floating around in your bloodstream, you cannot access the fat, the stored fat that everyone wants to burn. We want to be fat burners and not carbohydrate burners. Okay, so this is a big shift here. Once we become fat burners, that's an anti-inflammatory diet. That's an anti-inflammatory human being. It's an anti-inflammatory you. You get better, you get well, you live longer, you're happier. So we're really shooting for number 3. The free fatty acids do not need insulin to get into your cells and used for energy. And 4, if there is insulin, you cannot access the fat in your body. Okay, let's go on to the video.
Have you ever wondered why, despite all the fat-free foods, weight loss programs, and gym memberships, so many of us seem to be getting fatter? Every day, everywhere, we're bombarded with countless numbers of ads and articles all telling us how to lose fat. But did you know our bodies already know how? As we eat, our body converts our food into glucose, a simple sugar that travels through our bloodstream. This glucose is the primary food for our cells. Whether it's a muscle cell or a brain cell or a cell in our heart, they all feed on glucose.
Okay, so he said a real critical thing. So right here, this is your, let me change that. This is right here is your blood, right? Okay, that's your artery, that's your blood, and the G's are glucose. So he said a really important line is that your cells need glucose. That's their energy source. I should put a little caveat in here. That is one of the energy sources.
As glucose moves through our bloodstream, our pancreas produces a hormone called insulin. Insulin is the gatekeeper of our cells. It opens the door.
Okay, so this is key. It's hard to see, but that's insulin. This little thing is supposed to be an eye. Okay? So this is an eye. And he just said this acts as a gatekeeper. Insulin acts as a gatekeeper and allows things to go into the cell,
allowing glucose to enter and be used for our energy needs. Without it, our cells can't be fed. What if we eat more than we need? Well, along with our brain cells and muscle cells, we also have fat cells. Our cells never eat more than they need, so when we have more glucose than our cells can use...
Okay, so that was a real critical thing. He said our cells, so your heart, your brain, your muscle, all right, they're only going to take on so many calories. They're only going to take on so much glucose. When this happens, they don't take on any more energy, but there's always one thing that's always open for business, which is what? Fat. Fat's always willing to take on more calories and get bigger. So fat's always open for business. Your muscle, your brain, and your heart, they are not going to take on all these added calories or all this added glucose. They're going to shut off. Right now, when they shut off, that is called insulin resistant or sugar resistant, meaning that the glucose can't get in. It just kind of bounces off because your muscle cells, your brain cells, and your heart cells have been so bombarded for such a long period of time of high glucose that they can't actually believe that there's that much glucose floating around in the bloodstream. But fat is always willing to take on more calories. Now, in a bit here, you're going to see how this insulin here, all these insulins are going to drop away. And now when it starts to drop away, you're also going to see that the glucose here drastically decreases as well.
The excess amount is stored in our fat cells where it is converted into free fatty acids. Once the glucose is out of the bloodstream, with our cells having been fed and the surplus having been stored away in our fat cells, then insulin closes the doors to our cells and slowly leaves our body.
So you can see here how all the glucose is gone, right? There's no more glucose there. And then the insulin starts to fall away.
When our body needs more energy, or glucose, and we don't have any food handy, it turns to the fat cells and the free fatty acids stored inside them. The free fatty acids leave our fat cells and go right back into the bloodstream to feed all our other cells. They don't need insulin.
Okay, so here's a key thing is, so now we have changed our diet to a low glycemic index. We're not eating as many carbohydrates. That means that our fasting insulin goes down. So then we can take fat cells or fat energy from our fat and put it into the blood. Okay, so we're using that's FAA stands for free fatty acid. FFA stands for free fatty acids. Now here's the key: the free fatty acid can get into the heart cell, it can get in your brain cell, and it can get in your muscle cell without what being present? Without insulin being present. See, this is the whole concept. If insulin, if there's no insulin in your, if there's no glucose and no insulin in your bloodstream, we can grab the fat from the fat cells and we can put it into the cells, okay? Because the free fatty acids, the FFAs, don't need insulin to get into your cells versus, guess what, glucose glucose needs insulin attached there to allow glucose to get in, okay?
To open the cell doors. That's why they're referred to as free fatty acids. This natural process of storing fat when you have too much glucose and burning fat when you don't have enough glucose is how your body was designed to work. And in a perfect world, eating a perfect diet, everything works perfectly. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world, and most of us don't even come close to eating a perfect diet. As a result, we don't benefit from this natural process very often. Instead, we suffer by storing too much fat and rarely, if ever, burning any. Let's take a look at a typical breakfast in our imperfect world. When we get up in the morning, the first thing most of us have is a breakfast fairly high in sugar and processed foods. When this kind of food enters our body, it's converted into glucose very quickly and rushes into the bloodstream. The more sugary the food, the faster and higher our blood sugar or glucose level rises. Our pancreas senses this sudden spike in glucose and responds by pumping out the insulin, creating an insulin spike to correspond to the fast-rising glucose.
Okay, so this is, I just want to take some time and go over this. So let's say your breakfast was oatmeal. Okay, so you had oatmeal, orange juice, and let's say some skim milk. Now you're going to see the black right here, that's glucose. Okay, so if you eat oatmeal, oatmeal is broken down and goes into glucose. And then what happens here, the red is insulin. Okay, so you're going to see two graphs here. The glucose is black, the insulin is red. Now remember, if insulin is present in your bloodstream, we cannot access fat. If high levels of insulin, you're in a chronic state of inflammation. Okay, so this is really, really critical here.
The insulin does its job and opens the doors to our cells. All our working cells are fed, and all the excess glucose is then stored in our fat cells. Now this...
Okay, so now you can see here that the black is the glucose. So so you had breakfast at, 7 a.m. and then you started producing insulin, and insulin opens the doors, and then insulin opens the doors, and then the glucose goes into the cell, exiting from your bloodstream into the cell, and therefore your glucose levels are going to start to drop. Now what I want you to pay attention to is what happens up here with your insulin.
The process happens fast. Once insulin arrives, the glucose level in our bloodstream goes back down pretty quickly. However, it takes much longer for insulin to leave our body. So even though the glucose level in our bloodstream comes down fairly quickly, our insulin level remains high. And this can be a significant problem because as long as there is insulin still in our body, we can't access the free fatty acids stored in our fat cells. Remember, free fatty acids don't need insulin to allow them into the cells, but they do need insulin to be gone before they can leave our fat cells. Our body needs to eat continually, but the free fatty acids can't leave the fat cells. On come the cravings, the irritability, and so we eat. Our glucose levels spike right back up, our body releases even more insulin, the doors open, the cells are once again fed, and excess glucose is put into our fat cells. With our insulin level remaining high, we're still not able to release any fatty acids, so we continue adding to the fat storage, but never taking any out. This cycle continues through lunch, mid-afternoon snacks, dinner, and so on. We literally...
So you can see here, remember the black is glucose. See how you see how the insulin, or sorry, the glucose goes up and down. It spikes throughout the whole day. But what do we have up here at the top? We have insulin that lags. See, insulin doesn't shoot down as quickly as glucose. So if you're eating high carbohydrates throughout the whole day, or a lot of carbohydrates throughout the whole day, your insulin level is going to be high chronically all the time. When this is high all the time, your insulin, this is a state of chronic disease. This is a state that you cannot lose weight. Because in the video, remember he said, if you have insulin floating around in your bloodstream, you cannot access the fat stored in the fat cells. So we need to normalize this whole process here and get your body in an anti-inflammatory diet and regimen and start to heal the cells.
We end up bathing our bodies in insulin all day long and for much of the night. After a while, all that insulin takes a toll. We age much faster than normal, and many of us develop type 2 diabetes.
Okay, so I'm just going to replay this slide again without me narrating anything so you can see the video from start to finish.
Have you ever wondered why, despite all the fat-free foods, weight loss programs, and gym memberships, so many of us seem to be getting fatter? Every day, everywhere, we're bombarded with countless numbers of ads and articles all telling us how to lose fat. But did you know our bodies already know how? As we eat, our body converts our food into glucose, a simple sugar that travels through our bloodstream. This glucose is the primary food for our cells. Whether it's a muscle cell or a brain cell or a cell in our heart, they all feed on glucose. As glucose moves through our bloodstream, our pancreas produces a hormone called insulin. Insulin is the gatekeeper of our cells. It opens the door, allowing glucose to enter and be used for our energy needs. Without it, our cells can't be fed. What if we eat more than we need? Well, along with our brain cells and muscle cells, we also have fat cells. Our cells never eat more than they need, so when we have more glucose than our cells can use, the excess amount is stored in our fat cells where it is converted into free fatty acids. Once the glucose is out of the bloodstream, with our cells having been fed and the surplus having been stored away in our fat cells, then insulin closes the doors to our cells and slowly leaves our body. When our body needs more energy, or glucose, and we don't have any food handy, it turns to the fat cells and the free fatty acids stored inside them. The free fatty acids leave our fat cells and go right back into the bloodstream to feed all our other cells. They don't need insulin to open the cell doors. That's why they're referred to as free fatty acids. This natural process of storing fat when you have too much glucose and burning fat when you don't have enough glucose is how your body was designed to work. And in a perfect world, eating a perfect diet, everything works perfectly. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world, and most of us don't even come close to eating a perfect diet. As a result, we don't benefit from this natural process very often. Instead, we suffer by storing too much fat and rarely, if ever, burning any. Let's take a look at a typical breakfast in our imperfect world. When we get up in the morning, the first thing most of us have is a breakfast fairly high in sugar and processed foods. When this kind of food enters our body, it's converted into glucose very quickly and rushes into the bloodstream. The more sugary the food, the faster and higher our blood sugar or glucose level rises. Our pancreas senses this sudden spike in glucose and responds by pumping out the insulin, creating an insulin spike to correspond to the fast-rising glucose. The insulin does its job and opens the doors to our cells. All our working cells are fed, and all the excess glucose is then stored in our fat cells. Now, this process happens fast. Once insulin arrives, the glucose level in our bloodstream goes back down pretty quickly. However, it takes much longer for insulin to leave our body. So even though the glucose level in our bloodstream comes down fairly quickly, our insulin level remains high. And this can be a significant problem because as long as there is insulin still in our body, we can't access the free fatty acids stored in our fat cells. Remember, free fatty acids don't need insulin to allow them into the cells, but they do need insulin to be gone before they can leave our fat cells. Our body needs to eat continually, but the free fatty acids can't leave the fat cells. On come the cravings, the irritability, and so we eat. Our glucose levels spike right back up, our body releases even more insulin, the doors open, the cells are once again fed, and excess glucose is put into our fat cells. With our insulin level remaining high, we're still not able to release any fatty acids, so we continue adding to the fat storage, but never taking any out. This cycle continues through lunch, mid-afternoon snacks, dinner, and so on. We literally end up bathing our bodies in insulin all day long and for much of the night. After a while, all that insulin takes a toll. We age much faster than normal, and many of us develop type 2 diabetes.
Okay, so let's just kind of summarize what was in that video. So we have here that the insulin is high, right? Throughout the whole entire day. So this would be a state of someone that would be pre-diabetic or someone that would be diabetic. You could say this would be a person that has brain fog, even a person that has cancer, fibromyalgia, autoimmune conditions, because you can see here how the insulin is really high throughout the whole day, right? So what we really want to try and do is we really try and want to normalize normalize the glucose, which is the black, and then the insulin, which is the red. So once you're down here in this state here, then this is when your body really starts to heal and function, and your inflammation drastically goes down. So this is the new low-carb food pyramid, right? So what do we have down here? We have proteins, we have fats, we have nuts, salads, butter, and then down here, up here we have fibrous fruits. So you don't see any wheat on here, you don't see bagels on here, you don't see oatmeal on here. Why is that? Because those things are high carbohydrate, high index, and lead to chronic disease. Now, this was the pyramid, or I think this actually still might be the pyramid from the federal government. And one of the things that you're going to see here is what's the baseline of this stuff right here. What's the bottom? Is what? Bread, cereal, rice, pastas. 6 to 11 a day. This is why we're having such a condition of a chronic disease state in this country. So let's tell people the truth. Let's get them educated so they can actually, get better. So here's just another graph. It says, the glycemic index. Here's the blood sugar. You can see it says blood sugar right there. Nice smooth arch here. Now this is when we have high glycemic foods. You can see here, this is the blood sugar right there. And then you can see it goes high, and then what happens? You crash, and then you become what? You become hungry. So when you become hungry, what do you go eat? You eat a bunch of carbs, right? That's just how we've been trained to do. That's just what has been out there, which is why we have so many sick people. So insulin levels, for the most part, are determined by carbohydrate content of our diet. The quantity and quality of the carbohydrates consumed. The lower the fat in the diet, the higher the insulin, and vice versa. The way to get fat out of cells and burn it, which is what we want to do, is lower insulin. This has been known since when? The 1960s. This isn't a surprise. All right, it's just people need to be educated on this and explain what the heck is going on. So at the end of the day, I hope by now you can clearly see this is the meal that you want to be eating, right? The high fat, 5 eggs, bacon, cheese, avocados. This is the meal that's going to give you energy, low fat, or you're going to start to burn fat. You're going to have clearer thinking, right? All right, so here's, just let me get you oriented. This is glucose levels. That's glucose levels, and here's insulin levels. So let's say, I have markings here, 100 to 80, 80 to 100, and let's say this is the insulin. This would be like 3 to 8, okay? Now, this is what we want to see. When we have fasting glucose of 80 to 85, and then insulin, I just have it here, less than 5, but you can see we're on a low carbohydrate meal. Look what happens. Okay, you can see the glucose level go up, and then the insulin level go up, and then insulin slowly lags behind, right? So let me just show you that again. Okay, glucose goes up, insulin goes up. Okay, you're watching this part right here. Glucose comes down. You see that? Okay, let's just do it one more time. Okay, you're gonna watch. Goes up. You see how the insulin is starting, or the glucose is starting to go up, right? And then it comes down. All right, so we're in the nice, normal, healthy ranges. Now let's contrast that to this person right here. Let's say their morning glucose is 105 and their fasting insulin on blood work is 11. What do we know automatically? Right here, you're outside of the norm to start with, and your insulin is already high. So this is someone that be pre-diabetic, diabetic. So if this is happening right here, right, so we have an insulin of 11, what do we know right now? Can you access your fat? No, you can't. Okay, it's physically, you cannot access your fat. You're in carbohydrate burning. And like the first video I showed you of this series, right, is the calories are not getting into your cell. The glucose, when I say calories, I'm referring to glucose, is not getting into your cell, and you're chronically fatigued because your cells are insulin resistant, they're glucose resistant, they're just plain old hormone resistant. They're not very healthy. So let's clear this and just pay attention to this right here. So you can see how glucose goes up here, right? Glucose is going up, insulin's going up, really high, and then it comes down, and then it maintains pretty much high level, right? So let's just do that again. Goes up and then comes down, and then maintain a high level. Okay, so this next video here, it's a video, and it's going to show you what happens. People get neuropathy, like numbness in their feet, and this kind of shows you why that is.
A common complication caused by prolonged high blood glucose levels is nerve damage, known as diabetic neuropathy. Nerves are found throughout your body. They are responsible for everything you feel, from warmth and cold to pain. They also play a vital role in controlling your heart rate, digestive system, bladder control, and sexual function. Small blood vessels provide nerves with nutrients and oxygen required to survive and function. Your nerves are extremely sensitive to any change in their oxygen and nutrient supply. Damage to these small blood vessels occurs when blood, containing high levels of glucose, travels through them on its way to feed your nerves. When the small blood vessels are damaged, a sufficient supply of nutrients and oxygen no longer reaches the nerve, causing the nerve to become damaged and eventually...
So now remember here, when we talk about the Dr. Oz video, the high glucose is like what? It's like glass shards in your artery, tearing apart your artery and damaging the nerve, because these nerves are very, very sensitive. When the artery is damaged, like down in here, you can't get your blood flow deep down in there because it's damaged, and it doesn't allow your red blood cells to get deep into your arteries, or specifically it would be your capillaries is your smallest delivery system of blood. It won't get into the capillaries, and literally your nerves will literally start to die.
Die. The first sign of nerve damage occurs in the feet. It might feel like numbness, tingling, or burning. If left untreated, it can lead to complete loss of feeling and spread to other parts of the body.
Okay. Here we have automatically high levels of glucose, high insulin. So what does that look like when someone is on this kind of diet? Like, what are they eating when they're on this kind of when they have high glucose and high insulin? So let's kind of go over what the diet looks like. Carbs, bread, more pasta, breads, even bananas are high glycemic index, potatoes, cereals, candy, pops, oatmeal. Okay, let's compare this to someone that is low glucose, low. Okay, so let's compare this to someone that has low glucose levels and low insulin levels. What does it look like when this person eats food? That's hemp seeds, coconut oil, coconut fat. vegetables, avocados, more vegetables. What do we have? Meats. Okay, so you just this is kind of just give you a little different viewpoint of like what the meals actually look like to live, to be down in this area, down in here, which is what we really want. Okay, so let me orient you to this here. So this is a picture. We have, start off, we have high glucose levels and we have high insulin levels. Start off with. So here, this is the glucose. All this stuff is glucose. And then here, these other things here, these little yellow things, that's the insulin. Okay, so kind of let's go over this. So this person is insulin resistant. We're going to be talking, this is a muscle cell, a heart cell. This is something other than a fat cell, because fat cells are what? They're always open for business. So let's see here what happens. So you can see here how the insulin basically bounced off. It's becoming insulin resistant. Another insulin is trying to hit the cell, bounces off. Another one hits the cell, bounces off. Meantime, what's happening here is your insulin levels going up, your glucose levels going up. Another one hits the cell, bounces off. Bounces off. Okay, good. We finally got one that actually stuck. Now, what happens here is I've showed you this before. One sticks. Then what happens here? Then we have this little insulin is sticking on the cell. And insulin allows what? The doors to be open, right? So here we have the doors being open. And then once it's open, the glucose goes into the cell. Now, this is going to be everything, your muscle, heart cell. This is going to be everything except your fat cell, right? Fat cell is always open for business. This is 50 different names for sugar. 50 different names. So they have 50 different names for sugar, because if they only had one name, what would be in every ingredient, every packaged food? The first ingredient would be sugar, right? So that's why they have 50 different names for sugar. So here's some recipes. This is in the Maximize Living Nutrition book, but you can just see what we're doing here. We have eggs, we have good fats, we have stevia, we have some flaxseed, which is a low glycemic index product, zucchini boats. I just want to bring your attention to this. Beef, sea salt. So these are just some recipes. You can just see what we're trying to do. We're getting rid of all basically the carbohydrate-based meals or carbohydrate-based foods and substituting those for good healthy proteins, good healthy fats, and meals that are low glycemic index. So congratulations, you made it through the 4-part series, and you just added another 10 years on to your life. So I hope you found this series valuable, and I look forward to you getting well. Take care.